We're going to be learning the Maamar. We've learned this before. Tachas Asher Le'avad Taras Hashem V'Simcha V'Tuv Le'vav. It's the Likkutei Torah, Parshas Kisavai, and it's on top of page 9. It's on the bottom of page 9 on the right-hand side. So the pasuk says in this week's parsha, we're talking about the curses. In the middle of the curses, it says, "Why does all these bad things happen, or punishment, so to say?" So one of the reasons the Torah tells us, Moshe Rabbeinu tells us, is Tachas Asher Le'avadeta Hashem Elekecha B'Simcha, the fact that you didn't serve Hashem your Lord with joy. So here we have many explanations. We've learned about this before, but here the Alter Rebbe asks the question. The idea that a person should be able to, or should be expected to, so much so that bad things happen, to serve Hashem with simcha, that's the level of tzaddikim. And he brings a pasuk to support that it says, Simchu tzaddikim b'Hashem, how could he expect every person to reach this level when the verse in Tehillim says that it's Simchu tzaddikim, the righteous are happy with God. And here we're saying, Asher le'avadeta es Hashem b'simcha, that you didn't serve God with simcha. The expected means is expected from everyone to have this simcha. So the Rebbe says, chine, yesh beis madregas b'avodas Hashem. There's two levels of service. Midas yom and midas laila. There's what's called the attribute of day and the attribute of night. Bechinas Yaakov or bechinas Yisrael. There's the level of Yaakov and the level of Yisrael. Ubederech prat, and the Rebbe says in a more detailed manner, Heim bechinas Torah or bechinas Tefillah. It's the level of Torah and the level of Tefillah, of davening, of prayer. So day, night, Yaakov, Yisrael, Torah, and Tefillah. So there's Yom, Torah, Yisrael, Laila, Yaakov, and Tefillah. The idea is like this. The Maamar Zal, rabbis have taught us. Zman Torah l'chud, Zman Tefillah l'chud. There's a time for everything. The time for Torah has its time, and the time for davening has its time. Tefillah nikras chayisha. Tefillah prayer is called the chayisha, means the life of the time. It's more time dependent, right? You have the zmanim of specifically you have to daven shachris up until this point, mincha and up until this point, marv, etc. But Torah is the life of everlasting. To understand tefillah. Techsiv, it says in the verse, and Avram is the first to bring tefillah to us, is Vayashkem Avram baboker. Avram wakes up in the morning. What does that mean? That an Avram is Ava, is love, and Chesed. Sha'avam is called Echad ve'Echad Misrael, the hidden love that's within every Jew who behelm v'hester b'chinas sheina. It's concealed. So we have a natural love that's given to us, but it could be hidden. It could be in a slumber. But we have to wake up that love from its slumber, like it says in Shir HaShirim, the Shir HaShirim, in the Song of Songs. It says, Im ta'iru b'reish echad, im ta'oiru. If you're going to wake it up, or ta'oiru is also to wake up with one reish or two reishes, a beis reishin. Meaning, he says, Im ta'iru b'reish echad. What does it mean to wake up with only one reish? That's referring to chitzonis halef, the external of the heart. That the external of your heart, with loving other things, starts to feel for Hashem. But deeper than that, into this oiruru, b'shnei reishin, and if you're using two reishes, it goes deeper. Double reish, like the double hey, the silent sound of the hey. Hainu pnimis halef. That's deeper, not the chitzonis, the external of the heart. So to say, more the conscious or things that are connected to chitzonis, the external, but then pnimis, the inner depth of the heart. As a ava achetechbats, and it reaches the love until a person's only desire that they feel consciously, that's revealed so deep that the only thing shetechbats, the only thing he desires is the love for Hashem. Sheishman, so he says, ve'eis lechafitza tshuka shalavu muster sanal. There's a time that we could awaken ta'iruru, the essence of the heart, this hidden love. The Hainu, when we start awakening that's b'shachris, that's in the morning, that's Yom. And that's why it says, Vayashkem Avram baboker. The Avram wakes up in the morning. So boy, he wakes up, meaning to say that the Av of Avram, the deep love of Avram wakes up. So that's the waking up. What's the slumber of that? And if you have a person who's sleeping, that your thinking so to say, that it disconnects from the mind, from logic. And you're thinking, that's why you have dreams that are not logical, is that you're thinking connected to the moach, to the brain. That's what happens when a person sleeps. Therefore, the dreams are only imaginary things that are not necessarily always make sense. So much so that the rabbis have taught us that there isn't a dream that doesn't have shtiyot, doesn't have foolishness. When a person wakes up from the slumber, the thought reconnects. He actually uses a stronger term. It enters into the brain, and now what you're thinking is only logical thoughts. Stop at page 10. And then you start thinking things according to your want, things that you were focusing on. Unlike a dream where you could just dream things, not necessarily are you dreaming things that are logical or things that you want to dream about. Sometimes we have dreams that are things we don't want to dream about. You no longer have a choice in a dream. Whatever you dream, you dream. Okay, it could be that somewhere or another you're the cause of the dreams that you have. But the actual, when you're dreaming it, to be in control of it, to continue dreaming, or to change the thought, to change the direction of the thought, we don't have that control. So too, so too the slumber of the love. When it's asleep, so what does it mean? What does it mean that your love is asleep? You know that there's God. And in general, you have the idea that God fills the world. It's not a guarantee, and it's possible that you're going to do things contrary to this knowledge, knowing about Hashem. Even while you have a consciousness of Hashem, not that you're forgetful at a moment, you could do things that are contrary to your knowledge of Hashem, as it's brought down, and the Rebbe quotes many times. It's not a contradiction. Although it is a contradiction, but it's not unheard of for the thief to ask Hashem to bless him or her to be successful in the robbery. So if you know there's a God and you're asking Hashem to help you do something that Hashem doesn't want you to do, that you should be successful in this robbery. And why is that? How could it be that you have such a belief in Hashem and asking Him actually to help you? It's like a dream, it's imaginary. It's there, but there's contradictions, like a dream has contradictions. And we learned about the Maila, the Hayin Kacholmim, the beauty of the contradictions of Galus. But here we're talking about the fact from the perspective of that it's at the end of the day, it's still a slumber. It's just, so to say, passing over the logic. It means there's the knowledge of Hashem, but the knowledge isn't affecting how you don't react properly to that knowledge. But you're not entering, it's passing over the logic, but it's not entering the logic. You don't enter the logic with that knowledge of Hashem that it should affect your behavior. And the idea is that it shouldn't slumber. You have to wake that love up from its slumber. And the love should enter into the mind, and the mind should now work, so to say, according to the love of Hashem. If you love Hashem, then you can only want to do actually what Hashem wants. And how do we bring the, so to say, the Ava into the brain? Is through isboninus, contemplation. That's the davening. Vayashkem Avram Baboker is the process of starting to be awake and conscious and feeling of the love, and that starts from the davening until we reach the Krishma. And what is the idea? What are you contemplating? What is the general idea that we're contemplating here? God is the Lord of the world, meaning Kel Olam. God and the world is one. V'loi Kel Ha'olam, not God of the world. It means that there's a world and God, so to say, rules the world. God is Kel Olam. God and the world is one. She'eina Olam inim fnei atzmai. There is no separation between world and God. Why would a person think otherwise? It's because it comes from this, so to say, the ha'ara, the ray of the light of Hashem, like a ziv Hashem Hashem Mimenu, like the ray of a sun that comes from the sun. So too, Yisbarach Yishaleh B'Tzayim Liv V'Sayim. That's how He created the world. So therefore there's the possibility of the perception that there's a separation. But the Hisbonenus is telling the person, no, Kel Olam, God and the world are one. The Mashal gives an example. Like when you have something, there's the power of growth, of vegetation. There's the spiritual power of vegetation of why things grow. Asher ba'aretz, that's in the earth. Shemani yitzmach hasavim v'ilanus uperos. Because of that koach haruchni of tzameach is therefore grasses and trees and fruits and vegetables grow. So he says, Here he's giving an example of how the world gives a place for a perception of separation because it's coming from the ray, the ha'ora of the Or Ein Sof. So he says, surely a person would not feel that the actual vegetation itself, the fruits and vegetables, are the same as the koach haruchni, the spiritual power for growth that's in the earth. So to say it's only an extension, because the outcome of the koach haruchni, of the tzomeach, is the vegetation. That comes from the essence, the power of growth, and therefore there is growth. This is the idea that there's a neshama, there's a spirituality in everything that exists. Not just in humans and not just in animals, but in vegetation and even in domem. There's the nefesh, that's the spirituality, the koach haruchni. But there's the koach haruchni, and then there's what's called the megusham. There's the actual physical thing that comes into existence, and the same thing applies to our physical bodies. And this ray, so to say, of the power of tzameach, of growth, goes through a process to becoming so physical. And that's the physical fruit that gets grown from the earth. And not only does it grow in a certain shape or color, but there's different enjoyable, different various tastes in each fruit and vegetable. Mitika, sweet, bitter, etc. You can't say the same differences that are in the actual fruit, in its shape, taste, size, etc., is in the koach haruchni in the same manner. It's there, otherwise there wouldn't be that shape and taste, etc. So it has to take all its unique flavors and size and shape and colors from the koach haruchni, but you can't say it's exactly the same thing. It's not a duplicate. It's a process then from the ruchni to come gashmi. And you can't say that this is like moving water. So too moving the koach haruchni, moving water from a higher place to a lower place. Why? Because in that case, another reason is because when the water moves physically, that's the difference between shefa and or and mahar. Shefa, flow, is the physical thing, is either here or there. When you say there's a flow, so that the actual water itself, even if there's a river that's constantly flowing, but it has to be constantly being fed by its source. And the waters that are above, that fall now down below, are no longer above. Therefore, the waters that comes down, those exact waters are not in its original place above, because now it's down. But when it comes to the power to plant vegetation, you can't say that there's lacking now in the koach of tzameach because this fruit and vegetables grew, because the tzameach, the koach of tzameach in the tree has unlimited amount. I'm not going to say here. He says here he says many times ein misbar without counting. We do know that one of the reasons of Shemitah is to rest the land. And in order to get better quality, Omer, when they did the Spheres Omer and they did the Korban Omer, they would use different sides of the fields on a yearly basis because the other side would rest. So there's a concept of resting the field, but that could be about the earth, not so much the koach hatzameach in the earth. So the koach hatzameach doesn't get lessened by the fact that something is growing. So this is the difference between the light that manifests from the mar, or there's the shefa. Shefa is like a flow of water going from point A to point B. It's no longer in point A. And this is the reason. Because of the difference between shefa and or, is why our rabbis, when they talked about what does it mean that Hashem created the world, the physical world, comes from the koach hatzameach, haruchni goes into the physical, they call it ha'ara. Because like ha'ara, it doesn't take away, it doesn't lessen. The sun doesn't become weaker because it's lighting up in this house, or if the door is shut and the sun can't come into the house. So he says, hey Danny, like in the thoughts of a person. When a person thinks, where's the thoughts come from? It has a source. It comes from the nefesh and the neshama of the person. The fact that you're thinking doesn't affect the soul, that now the soul, so to say, runs out of the power of thought because you've thought too much. You can tell a person you're thinking too much. You try to direct that thought. In talking, we tell a person stop talking too much. But when it comes to thought, there's no such thing as you exhausting the power of thought. It could be exhausting to think, but you're not exhausting the ability to think because you've thought. A person could think unlimited amount of thoughts. So what is the idea of this comparison? And what do we think? This is the hisbonenus. This is what he means, that the hisbonenus is all this hisbonenus a person is supposed to contemplate in order to awaken the ava that's hidden, the hidden love. When a person's hidden love is asleep, it's not real to you. The point is how do you make godliness a reality to you? You have to go through the process of hisbonenus. And in the other Maamar, it says in order for you to be affected by that hisbonenus, you have to make the heart available to that information. That even by thinking hisbonenus doesn't necessarily respond to that. But you need, even if you've prepared your heart for that, you need at least you have to feed it with information. And this is what it means vayashkem Avram Baker, to awaken the love. And he's going to talk at the end of the Maamar how we prepare ourselves to be responsive to this information. So, but nevertheless, so that's why a person thinks, realizes that Hashem, it's a ray, so to say, it's something that manifests from God to create kind of automatically, but nevertheless, it's not chashiv, meaning to say, just like the thoughts, the power to think doesn't get affected by you thinking, so too the creation doesn't affect God. God doesn't get weakened or lessened because he created. There's no change that is affected because he created. In the other Maamar, they say there has to be a little bit of a change, meaning there has to be a little bit of fact because there was before and the after, or from our perspective at least. But in general, we say ani violation nisi. Violation nisi, I don't change. And then he quotes this verse, "V'atu kaidim shnivra." And the Maamar explains, why does it say Atu Kaidim Shnivra? Because maybe you would think that the fact that before the world there wasn't a world, now there is a world, there is a change. But we say no, Atu Kaidim Shnivra, just like you were before the world, you so too you now Atu Mishnivra, from when the world was created. And this is all the hisbonenus that should be ma'orer to awaken the ava betfil, love that you have in davening. That's how we start Haidul Hashem Kir B'Shmai. Haidul Hashem, the idea of Haidah, acknowledgement. We call out to his name, and we realize that God is not the God of the world, that the world is separate, but God is the world. And that's the idea of the prayer. And we repeat ourselves. Why we repeat ourselves? Because the very fact that not every time you know information, do you know information? Do you become one with that information? Until it's so established within your heart, this idea is as if it's visual to you. We have to do it in contemplation. That's the arichas hatfilah. Each person according to their abilities. There have some people that have a more physical, so to say, mind, and it's harder. It's not so refined, and therefore you have to talk longer or deeper or in a different language. And they have to pay attention more. But fundamentally, everyone has to respond eventually, and yet that's your job in tefillah to respond to this information. So then if that's the case, if the whole idea of tefillah is just the idea of hisbonenus to awaken the avos Hashem, we do find that in tefillah there's bakashes. We asking things Hashem for things. And we also praise Hashem, and we're not just talking to ourselves information. We're asking, we're praising. So why? Why did the members of the Great Assembly add the different quests that we have from Hashem and praises that we give Hashem in the tefillah? The reason is the Alter Rebbe says, is Ma'achamas sheyesh kitregim al adam, because there's those voices, adversaries, that judge the person, and they judge him or her, is this person worthy to have the experiences of Avas Hashem? And there's a lot of things that are from within the person themselves that are blocking the person from properly having this isbaininus, whether it is your mind, the power of concentration, or other distractions that are not allowing you to daven. Therefore, we ask Hashem, have compassion to let us daven. You're compassionate. But the bottom line is, these are all these are all helpers to allow us to daven, to awaken the Ava, the love of Hashem. Over Kiyar Shema, we say the actual Shema. It says, Havaya Lekenu Echad, Hashem is one. The Isa b'Gemara, as the Gemara teaches us, Anshi Yiricha Hayikorichem Es Shema, Le'emafsikim Echad Levihavta. As soon as they said Shema, they right away said, I love Hashem. They said the 6 words of Shema Yisrael Hashem Lekenu Hashem Echad V'Havta. They didn't say in between Baruch Shem Kvod Malchusay. Fishem Tluim Zebezeh, because by them it was automatically. So if he's when he reached the Shema Yisrael, and then their contemplation of the unification of Hashem, right away they had the love. The law is not like the Anshi Yirichai, the people of Jericho. We do say Baruch Shem Kvod Malchusay Le'emvad, but the idea is there. The idea is that Shema, at that point, it's a culmination of everything we've been saying up until that point. The davenings, the bakashas, the shvachim, all the helpers, and for us to actually feel the love, and then we say Shema Yisrael. That's the kind of that final statement, and the response is if you have to. Why? So why is it not it's not a hefsek? So the answer is Shabaruch Shem Kvod Malchusay Le'emvad le'hav hefsek mishum shegam zeh razed echad. The reason is because that's also part of the secret of one. When we say the Baruch Shem Kvod Malchusay, kind of talking to our level of our soul. In other places, it says that the Anshi Yirichai were on a much higher level. So therefore, they went straight into V'yahavta, where we have to sometimes bring it a little down to ourselves more. Baruch Shem Kvod Malchusay to stress the God's kingship over us. But at the end of the day, Voed is the secret of Echad, B'chalufei Avzon, in the Kabbalistic ways of changing the letters, as is known. V'hine, he says, this love that we're revealing, there's 2 levels of love. There's Ava Shanasis Me'aleha. There's a natural love. That happens when a person's contemplation of the oneness of Hashem. And then it's like a flame that just rises up to its source. And it's burning kirish b'yesh. And it has no agenda. It's not because I love Hashem because I want something from God. There's no mavukesh, there's no quest. It's just literally the experience of the love itself. This talks about, when you talk about the tzaddik, it talks about it in the first chapters of Tanya. But it's not even to try to satisfy your own thirst. It's just an absolute expression of a connection between the soul and God. Who's a true chassid? Hametz chassid in Kanye just wants to be with his creator or her creator. So that's one love. Bava Sheni is the second love. It says, where you do want to connect. It's about you wanting to connect to God. And this is where he's going to start answering. At this idea that it says Simcha Tzadikim B'Hashem, that only the righteous have Simcha, that's the higher level of love. But the love that you want, that you realize that it's in your best interest. God is your source of life. Everyone could reach that love. That's the commandment for V'yahavta. Do what it takes to really reach the level that you want to love Hashem. The idea is that you want that Hashem should be your Lord. The first love, that's only the highest level of tzaddikim. So now he answers the question. He asks the question that we say that all the punishments happen because you didn't have simcha. How could you say that simcha is only for tzaddikim? He says, no, there's 2 levels. There's the simcha that comes from the natural love that has no conditions, no agenda. But the love that you exist, that you have yesh misha'ayiv, there's someone who loves. So that's lower. Yes, you exist and you have consciousness of your needs, but the idea is those needs should be in line with your love of Hashem. And that's what it means, Kabbalas Malchus Shemayim B'Krishma, to accept the yoke of heaven in Shema. You can't actually cleave. No thought could grasp or cleave to Hashem. When he's, so to say, hidden, there's places, there's worlds higher than even the world to come. God is even hidden from them. Hiddenness and deeper, different expressions of hiddenness you can't actually get the essence of God. So how do you dafka boy? So that's why we continue Shema. Torah. When a person studies Torah, speak the words of Torah. That's what Hashem did in Torah. Anoichi, nafshik savas Yehavis. God infused His essence into Torah. And in the laws of Torah, in the laws of the halachas, in the performance of the mitzvahs, when you learn Torah and you do mitzvahs, you're toifsim. That's how you grasp Hashem. And from there comes the extension of Hashem into the Torah of mitzvahs. Just like when a person eats the fruit, although it's not tangible to you or even knowledgeable to you, that koach hatzemech, the ruchni, the spiritual power of vegetation that's in the fruit. But the fact is, when you hold that fruit, especially when you eat that fruit, you become one with that koach hatzemech, because the koach hatzemech is that power why the fruit's there in the first place. Like it says, ki tal oiris talecha. That through the process of the man, it was actually there. You're able to see it because of the miraculous of the man. That this is actually a manifestation of Hashem. And nevertheless, they were able to put in the meducha is the mill to grind it up and make it into flour, whatever, a kind of man flour, and turn it into dishes, different types of foods. That's why the Torah has the or of Hashem. The infinite of Hashem is within Torah. So now he's saying so if you can reach the love of the second love, the love of the regular person, because he's your life, and how do you actualize that love? To be tofes, to be davik. It says you want to cleave to God. So how do you cleave to God? Learn Torah, do mitzvahs. So you learn Torah and do mitzvahs. So he says, if that's the case, why don't you have simcha? You have to have joy when you study Torah and do mitzvahs. Because when you study and do mitzvahs, you're actualizing the love that you have. And you're connecting to Hashem, and you're actually grasping the essence of God through Torah and mitzvahs. If this is what you're thirsty for, this is how you satisfy the thirst. You had a thirst to connect to God. You connected to God. So why you don't have simcha? That's why it says. So if you don't have simcha, what's going on? So the negative things that happen, and again, the Alter Rebbe says in other explanations, it's not that you get punished for not having simcha, but had you had simcha, it would override all the shortcomings you have. So the simcha is that a person realizes, when you have simcha, you realize you connect to Hashem, that elevates you from anything, from any kind of din, any kind of judgment. Every person could reach the simcha, so why are you not happy? Every time you do a mitzvah, it's an opportunity you've done something, you've connected to Hashem, that should bring you tremendous joy. There should be no greater joy than that. He says there's two levels of learning Torah. There's echa take of acher tefillah. There's one level right after one davens wants to learn Torah. Why? That's the v'dibarta bam, right? We just said you love Hashem and you need to bring it into words. So that's the learning of Torah right after davening. That's why many shuls have the custom of a halacha or something. Some Torah you have to learn after you daven. A take of acher tefillah, when a person awakens the love. Right? That's what the Alter Rebbe says many times. You have to direct that love somewhere. And you have to direct it into Torah. But nefesh tzmeik it's something l'mayim. So you've created this tremendous thirst, like a person is mamish thirsty for water. Now you have simcha. You've got thirst and you drink. You learn the Torah. Is in the second level of studying Torah. When sometimes you've disconnected from that consciousness of love throughout the day. Whether you're a business person, you're out there in the world, or even if you're a Torah scholar. When you're kind of out there in the world and you're losing the love, you say, 1 second, let me stop everything for 5 minutes and learn something. Because when I learned the Torah now, I'm connecting to Hashem. But God and the Torah is one. And although now you're so far from God because of that, you're focusing on other things, again, not negative things, but you're just so preoccupied in life and business and work. You're in the world doing business. But you didn't do anything wrong. It's beheter, it's permissible. So therefore, when you study Torah, you elevate those moments that you've been kind of unconscious of godliness. Because as long as you don't do anything prohibited, so those moments that you're out in the world don't get tied down to chitzonius. Because when they're forbidden, when whatever you're doing is forbidden involved, so then it's like it's a tug of war. You've given over that time and energy to something else and trying to pull it back when you learn Torah, but it's holding on. It's as if, for instance, you're held captive by an enemy. The world, you're out there in gashmistic things. But there's no door, there's no handcuffs, there's no lock, there's no chain. No one's stopping you from running away. But while you're there, you feel like you're a captive. It's only if you're going to do something wrong. So when you do something wrong, so then you're locking the door. And if you do, then you have to do tshuva to release yourself. Tashuv hey, to return. Rabbi says on the contrary, not only do you have opportunities, as long as that being out there in the world is not disconnected from Hashem and sort of say locking yourself up to the world. On the contrary, those moments when you think, 1 second, I'm distant now. You know your situation. Because the Alter Rebbe says it's not just talking about the business person, even the Torah student. A lot of people don't just, it's hard to sit there and learn consciously the whole day. A lot of time we just talk, wasteful words. And of course, a person who's maybe done sins in their youth, kind of that you've been tied down since your youth to things, as each person knows. Although you've done tshuva, but if you haven't done the highest level of tshuva, and that could be in certain cases of sigufim, markim, in certain pains that you may experience or cause, that kind of cleanse yourself from the sin. More. And the more you realize that you're disconnected. And this is the merirus now. You become you have a certain self-loathing of the things you've done that caused you to be disconnected. And therefore, you're no longer the most important thing. You realize you have no chutzpah. How do you have the chutzpah to make yourself so important? You're like a shirayim. You only like the leftovers. Why was I here in the first place? Why would God create me? I'm not doing what I should be doing. So Rebbe says on the contrary. And this person is even double happy when they learn Torah. Because if you have nothing, if you're totally connected, just kind of distance out in the world, so you're studying Torah, you're reconnecting, that's even more simcha. But even more so if you have all the reasons of disconnect, of the chatas neurim, the sins of the youth, and other things that are mamish of holding you down. But when you learn Torah now, you can connect to Hashem. You're taking Hashem. So the simcha has to be more than that. So the merirus brings simcha. The bitterness, when you're bitter about something and you find the solution to your bitterness, you're extremely joyful. Even more than the person who's never bitter or had nothing to be bitter about. So again, there's no excuse for not being happy. And when does a person become depressed? And here we're talking about not depressed. We could be talking about, you could apply this to either way, but even depression in avoda. When does a person become depressed in their avoda and say, I'm a nothing, I can't accomplish anything in my service of God? It's when you think greatness is you're deserving of greatness. I should be a really spiritual guy. Why am I not? Why am I not like Rashbi? I could be Rashbi. The Rebbe says, where do you come off thinking you're like Rashbi? You're not Rashbi. So what are you getting depressed about, not being Rashbi? Any chance you have to connect, you should be happy. Rashbi was a person who learned Torah a whole day. That was his occupation. He was totally connected. With 1 second, he could change everything in the world. He never was sleeping. He was totally conscious. So therefore, he's Rashbi. He's Rashbi. So but you're not Rashbi. So you should be B'simcha. Where do you come off being depressed? And surely, if your depressions are not about ruchnius things, your depression are about your lack of gashmis, or your lack of kavod, or your lack of recognition in physical on a physical measurement. So where do you? And therefore you're depressed. You have an opportunity to connect to Hashem, to connect to the emes avaya. You should be happy every time you learn. You should bring you tremendous simcha. Reb Shimon was such a great level. He was so awake. The love was so conscious. Therefore, he didn't have to daven. Why did Rashbi not have to daven? He was parted from davening because he was constantly conscious of the Ava. We just said the davening is to awaken the Ava. Vayashkim Avram baboker. But the Rashbi never went to sleep. What does it mean that God forgives and allows? And a person, l'she'eres nachalase, means when you don't think you're something great, when you put yourself as a kishirayim, as secondary. When a person has shiflus, has humility, the Torah, so to say, overrides the sin. Because you're not thinking greatness for yourself, and therefore just the opportunity to learn. So to say, the Torah responds to that. The Torah doesn't even allow for the sins you have to take hold. Like we know that when the sun hits the earth, the lowest places are the hottest places. And in this case, the lowest places is a marshal, an example to a person who humbles themselves. Where the light finishes. Is where it's the hottest. The sun. Like we find that the mountains, the higher you go up, the more snow, the more icy it is. Right? You ever go on a plane, you feel the window, it's freezing. So through the Torah. Where's the Torah? Where's the light of the Torah? Warm up and connect. The more you make yourself secondary, you humble yourself. This means it overrides the sin. At the same time, you don't become so to say careless with this kind of ability to connect. Nevertheless, you still view yourself as a sinner. Al derech avilim miderech pisham hamvur acha b'dir maska b'leitzchanes k'machkas of derech avilim yasher beinav. So you're not like the person who's the sinner who thinks everything's okay. Yasher beinav, everything's right. You know things are not right. And you're not unconscious of what's going on. You understand your sin. You understand the Torah is Baruch Hashem forgiving. But all this brings the simcha. The understanding of where I'm holding and all this is I have simcha. This is what we said in the beginning of the Maamar. This is the Yaakov of every person. Yisrael is a much higher level. You're a master. This is not the person who the davening, so to say, or the love is just a love to connect, and the joy and the simcha is the ability to connect. But you have Yisrael, you have the certain people that are they're masters. And then when did they awaken this great love and daven and the Torah after davening? And a person who's on a level of Yisrael has an easier way of having simcha, because it's not through the passages, so to say, of shiflus. It's not the passages. It's not through the lowliness, but it's an elevated simcha. So there's some people that don't have to have a reflecting light where it balances off the lowest point. They have a yasher kel. But there's certain people that are Yisrael, that through the davening and learning, it's just it's the avarab of the great love. But there's the level of Yaakov, and even Yaakov has a reason to have simcha. Let's skip the parentheses. He explains again what we just spoke about, the difference between Simchut Tzadikim Hashem, which was his question, and there's Moedim L'Simcha. There's certain times where everyone could kind of get a higher level of Simcha. But let's go a little further. He says, let's start from Gimel on the left-hand side. V'hinei koydem tefillah tzarich kovidreish. This is what I said before. So we're saying that every person through tefillah could reach the ava, the love, that you want to thirst, and the thirst is avas olam, kela, and you realize God is the God of the world, and you respond to that, and therefore you want to connect, and you have v'yahavta, and you love Hashem, and so you're loving Hashem even though it's not the avim seteris. You haven't revealed a great love, but you revealed the love, a conscious love. That this is what's good for me, even kihu chayecha. And how do you connect? You want to connect, and how do you connect with learning Torah? And therefore, there's no excuse not to be b'simcha. But like I said before, but you have to. It's not enough to just use your mind. Your heart has to be receptacle to that information. So he says, "V'hinei koydem tefillah." Before we come to the davening, sarach koy v'drosh. What does that mean, koy v'drosh? Kind of say a lowness of the mind, so to say, like lowering your head, a heaviness on the head. Shuhu amerirus, that's the bitterness. What's the merirus? Why isn't it? Why am I not feeling the Yisrael in me? Every person has Yisrael. Why am I not? Why can't I feel? Why am I only the love of Yaakov? Why am I not feeling it? Why am I not? Why do I have to? Why does my heart feel empty? Feel unresponsive? Because of the sins. This is heavy-headed. And this causes a person to have hachna, which is a level of humility, v'shiflus, lowness, b'chifsus atzmai. Don't lift yourself up. Realize you're not something special, so to say. When you realize this, your mind, you realize this is my situation. It's not that you have to actually feel, but you have to know. And he says, but at the same time, you can't be like a person who feels that when it comes to davening, I could have just a closed up heart, and I start saying the words, and then I'm going to say v'yahavta. I mean, how you said all the words, you said that you talked to yourself, you did all this bindiness, you said Shema, but you're not. Your lev is closed up. It's not. It's like trying to pour something on a sealed vessel. There's nothing. It's not going to go in. The chesed that wakes up in the morning, the day comes, the day goes. You have to start again. You have to open up the heart that it should be receptacle. And how do you get rid of the timtum halev? Timtum halev means, okay, there's in different places of Chassidus, it compares this idea of meriris to plowing. Just like you have to plow the earth and to soften the earth. Otherwise, if you just throw seeds on unplowed earth, nothing's going to happen. So too, the heart has to be plowed. So the actual heart itself has to be worked on to be receptacle to this hisbaininus, to start feeling the love. But timtum alev is kind of beyond that. Timtum alev is it's like there's a shell around the heart that's not allowing it to feel. So how do we get rid of that timtum alev? I guess in other places it explains it different ways, whether it is just revealing the receptacle of the heart or making the heart the receptacle. But either way, the heart on its own, the way we have it, is not ready just to be informed of information, to be responsive. So what are the three ways? It says, there's three ways to get rid of these obstacles that prevent the heart from feeling. Aleph is mikvah. That's why we go to the mikvah in the morning. Mishnah, as it says, Ma mikvah matar, just like the mikvah cleanses. So this idea is that it cleanses the person to be receptacle to tefillah. V'ini Arif, the Rebbe, the Alphys, which was one of the original Rishonim who lived in North Africa. Perik Gimel de Brachas, v'Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah, and the students of Rabbeinu Yonah, Kasu v'Shem Reb Hai, they say both in the name of Reb Hai Gon. Right? So Reb Hai Gon was one of the last of the Gaonim that were before the Rishonim. Like Rabbi Steinzalt says, Reb Hai Gon was Pashat, the leader of all the Jewish people. This that it says, so the Rif says in Brachas, and the Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah say in the name of Reb Hai, that they say that a person does not need to go to the mikvah. That's only talking about a person who had a seminal discharge is when it comes to learning Torah. But according to the Rif, and Talmid Rebbe Yonah, you can't daven unless you go to the mikveh first, if you've had any seminal discharge. Even though that's not the halacha is not like the Rif and the students of Rebbe Yonah, in the name of Reb Hai. As the Shulchan Aruch paskins halacha. But the students of Rebbe Yonah say, I think the Rashba was one of the students of Rebbe Yonah, Reb Shlomo ben Aderet, that everyone agrees that if you go to the mikveh, your davening is more makubal, is more accepted. But the halacha doesn't prevent you from davening if you didn't go to the mikveh. What's the reason why that everyone agrees that Torah, you don't have to go to the mikveh, but tefillah, the Rif, Rebbe Yonah, and the name of Reb Hai say lefachot it's better. Based on the Yishalmi, Mishnah Sota, at the end of the tractate of Sota, that when a person is pure, it gives you a fragrance of spirituality. And it's in the Talmud Bavli also. I smell Reichid the Chaninusa. He says he was able to smell from when he responded to something. I remember the Gemara over there. The smell of tmorim, of dates, of a nice fruity smell. Amar le b'ni tahar yesh b'cha. When he said that, I see that you're pure. So we see a good smell is a sign of tahara. So we see that the purity gives off a good fragrance. The fact that we're not talking about a physical fragrance, because we're talking about someone who was able to smell it. Like Yitzchak says, I smelled when Yaakov walked in. He said he smelled the smell of Gan Eden. Rashi says, when he smelled the smell of Gan Eden, he was wearing goat skins. That's the physical smell, but the spiritually, Yitzchak smelled the smell of Garden of Eden. Why would purity or impurity give off a fragrance? Because Tuma Tara is an encompassing, so it's like a smell is an encompassing idea. Therefore, it's connected to smell. The purity gives off a fragrance because it's encompassing the person. So therefore, of course, you go to the mikveh. V'nikabonis, like we say when it comes to sacrifices, that's a reich nichoch. It's a pleasing smell for Hashem. Vayarach Hashem is reich nichoch. God smelled the pleasant smell when Noach did the sacrifice. Ubezeh yuva Maamar zal perkan ezikim. What was the punishment that Titus had for destroying the temple? Was that a mosquito went up his nostrils. Why? God punished him. Why? Because he destroyed the temple, and he nullified, because of the destruction of the temple, the sacrifices. That was giving God a pleasing smell. His punishment was that up his nostrils he was punished by the mosquito. Like it says, Uthilasi echtem lach. What does it mean echtem lach? My prayer is like, so to say, a nostril. Because davening is in the place of the sacrifices. It also causes a good fragrance. So therefore you should be tahar, you should go to the mikveh before you daven. There's an expression that says, I pray to the one with the nostrils, the one who smells. Therefore, the number one is you have to go to the mikveh. It gives this pleasant smell. And that's the idea that to the person who smells, who appreciates the good smell, the fragrance that I have, is because I retire myself, I purify myself. Therefore, the students of Rebbe Yonah says, you may not halachically have to go to the mikveh, but everyone agrees, if God is sensitive to smell, so he's sort of the Talmid Rebbe Yonah is saying, you may not halachically have to, but it definitely adds points. Okay, let's skip that. That's number one. Number two is to make yourself a receptacle before you start davening is tzedakah. Person has to give tzedakah before they daven, like it says, Rabbi Elazar, Yoav Pruta, Rabbi Elazar gave a little bit of tzedakah, like it says, but tzedek with justice, also tzedakah, echza panech, I come to see you, which is talking about tefillah. Why do you have to give tzedakah before you're davening? So he explains, because again, there's adversaries, Allah Adam, that don't allow the tefillah to go in and say, why would you listen to this person? Do you know did you ever watch the way this person behaves? Why would you want to listen to this person's davening? So by giving tzedakah, you break that negative talk. And the Ketrogim, the adversary voices, are saying he doesn't belong, she doesn't belong to go into the palace. Melech Malchem Malchem HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'tefillah, through davening to enter the palace. Tzedakah Tatzel. Tzedakah saves a person from that situation. Tzedakah Tereimim Goy. It elevates you that there shouldn't be any adversaries. And the Vagimel, and the third way to prepare for davening is Eisik V'limud HaMusar, is to learn the Musar, like he brings down in the footnotes. The Rebbe says when he means Musar, he means Chassidus. Specifically what we find in the Zohar, B'lashon Ha'ora Shemer B'makom HaChoshech. That's the light of the Zohar. From the word Zohar is light. It lightens up the darkness. Through Chachmas Emes, which is the truth, the wisdom of truth. Then he finishes off the Maamar. I'm sorry to say, I'm not 100% sure I understand this last part. I mean, I understand what he's saying, but not sure how it flows in the continuation. He says, "Eishes Chayil Ter Spaila." We know the Eishes, the woman, is an Atera. She's a crown to her husband. What does it mean that the woman's the crown to her husband? Hi Amuna. This is the belief. That Hashem fills the world. Even if you don't have the contemplation. So that simple belief in God, because at the end of the day, I think what Rebbe is saying here is after this whole Maamar where we say the person is preparing oneself through making your heart receptacle and davening and responding and feeling the love and having the simcha. So he says, nevertheless, that the hispainness is even a simple belief is very, at the end of the day, the simple belief is very important to God because that's the bottom line. That's what makes a dir b'tachtonim. What does it mean to crown to her husband? Pirsh b'ayli hi avarabba. So she crowns the husband that internalizes the information. So the simple love isn't even greater than what we've learned up until this point. Because in the basic belief that a person has, and when you realize that Hashem is filling the world and therefore you want to connect him, it's a masculine that even the person who's done the avodah, that wants to connect, like we said, you want to do simcha and you have simcha because you're connecting, that's the masculine, that's being proactive. But at the end of the day, the Eishes Chayil, the Amunah Pshuta, the simple belief is even a crown above that. I think that's what he's saying. He finished off the whole Maamar after all the talk. At the end of the day, is nothing surpasses the simple belief a Jew has in Hashem. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining, and Laila Tov, and see you, B'ez Hashem, next week.